Welcome, everyone. We'll give everyone a minute to get logged in here.
Do we have some people in the lobby?
Not that I see. Just had 2 more people register though. Like we have 1 person that logged on their phone here. Let's give it another couple minutes.
Yes, 11:01, so maybe people are still trying to make their way in.
There we go. Let's give it just maybe 1 more minute before we get started here.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah Knudsen. I'm helping the Denver MBDA set up these series of webinars for small socially or economically disadvantaged businesses here in Colorado and across the country. The MBDA is here to help those businesses go after certifications and state, local, and federal contracting. So we are recording today's webinar with John, who I'll introduce here in a moment. And you'll receive a recording of the webinar after we're done today, as well as a copy of his slides and another resource that he will talk about, as well as our presentation from our partner B-Side, who will be at the end here. And then also a link to where you can register if you would like to take advantage of the free services that MBDA offers. And today I'm excited to present to you our Ask Me Anything session with our cybersecurity expert, John Ikboe. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yes.
With Tech Axia. You all were invited to send us some questions prior to the event. We do have a couple of those, but we will start with John giving a short presentation here, and then we're going to keep this casual. We have a small group today. If you have questions, I invite you to raise your virtual hand, and then I'll be able to unmute you and you can ask your questions with John directly. So John, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for presenting for us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate the introduction and the time to share and present today. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're calling in from. And thank you for joining today's webinar session on Ask Me Anything Cybersecurity edition. I'm going to present a quick overview, information that applies more so to federal contractors before we open it up for Q&A. So, and I'm going to share my screen as well. All right, before I proceed, Sarah, are you able to see my screen?
I am, yep.
Awesome, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, today we're going to go over, and actually I will, that's a little bit about me. I'm the CEO of Tecaxia and the GCC High Lead Architect at Tecaxia, and we focus on helping federal contractors achieve CMMC compliance. The agenda for today, we are going to look at the era of cyber regulations. Really, that's the era we are in right now, as we're going to see. After that, we'll talk about the federal acquisition regulation. Most of our audience today are federal contractors, and we're going to look at the cyber regulation that applies to many federal contractors. And we're going to go into a little more details into those lists of what are those specific cybersecurity requirements that the federal government is requiring of federal contractors. And this will be very beneficial for either current contractors or aspiring contractors, folks, companies that want to do business with the federal government. This will be very helpful to understand what is basic, means more like the entry level cybersecurity requirements that the federal government is requiring of any company that want to do business with them if they have this clause in their contracts. Next, we are now going to look at how you can use a Microsoft 365 services or cloud to help you meet these requirements. And the reason for that is a lot of small businesses already use the Microsoft cloud. And instead of reinventing the wheel, how can you take advantage of what you are already paying for, what you already know to meet these cybersecurity requirements? Then we'll proceed to talk about some cybersecurity compliance tips that federal contractors can use, some things to keep in mind to help you save costs and accelerate the timeline to compliance as a federal contractor, especially if you have the 552 clause in your contracts. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A, really anything on your mind, anything you need help with around cybersecurity as a federal contractor, that'll be the time to ask. Without much further ado, let's get into it. Like I mentioned earlier, really we are already in the era of cyber regulations across multiple industries. So as you can see, the SEC Rule 30 that applies to the financial industry. There are several federal regulations. Several cyber regulations that applies to the financial sector. Then we have the HIPAA cyber regulation that applies to the medical or healthcare field. We have the COPPA, and that's for online privacy for children, people under 13 years of age. We have the GLBA, again, that applies to financial institutions. Then we have the DFARS 7012, that is specifically to defense contractors, small businesses that want to do business with the Department of Defense, the Navy, the Army, the Marine, any arm of the Department of Defense. And then we have the PCI DSS cyber regulation that applies to payments card companies that process, store, transmit, or process payments card information. So the point of this slide being that we are really in the era of cyber regulations, and it's important to realize that and to begin to align to that. And the beautiful thing here is that as a small business, you can actually take advantage of this as a competitive business advantage rather than being a victim. Just like so many things that have happened in history when the internet came, right? Over time, a lot of companies were either a victim of that or actually took advantage of that. It's something with this era of cyber regulations. It's important to understand that the era we are in, as a federal contractor, as a small, socially disadvantaged federal contractor, that we are in the era of cyber regulations. And then how can you position yourself, on the right side of history, where this becomes an enabler for success for you rather than a negative. So again, welcome to the era of cyber regulations. We are already in that era right now. And it's important that as a business owner, that you are aware of this and position yourself to take advantage of it rather than being a victim of it. And it's happening, cyber regulation is happening not just in the federal contracting ecosystem, but as you can see in the financial industry, healthcare, I even learned there's one coming up for car manufacturers, auto dealers, there's one coming down the pipe for them. So we can see several regulations coming down, down the line for pretty much all industry verticals. So it's important, to be aware of it and position our companies, your businesses, to take advantage of it. And today, most of our audience are federal contractors, so we are going to narrow in on the cyber regulation that applies to federal contractors. And that's what we have on the screen. It's called the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR Clause 52, 20421. This was introduced by the US government in 2016. Obviously back then there were beginning to be an increasing number of cyber hacks that were affecting the federal government. We had the OPM hack and several other high profile cyber incidents that happened at the time, for which the US government responded by enacting a set of 15, depending on what subset you look at, is that 15 or 17 basic cybersecurity requirements that the US government is saying, hey, any business, whether small, mid, or large, and especially smalls that are already doing business with the government or want to do business with the government, here are a list of basic cybersecurity requirements that you have to meet if you want to play in terms of do business with the federal government. And interestingly, one of the benefits of actually adhering or implementing this list of 15 cybersecurity requirements in your company, that will mean that once you do this, it means that you are also CMMC compliant, and at level 1. And just for the sake of those that may not be familiar with what CMMC is, CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And back in 2017 December, and this applies more so to DoD, DoD contractors right now, but it's likely going to expand to the rest of the federal contracting space, even beyond DoD. Every arm of the federal government that any small business wants to do business with will likely have to comply with this as well. And this particular clause, the FAR 52 clause, is already in multiple contracts, but finishing up, that thought process around CMMC. So back in 2017, the DoD realized that they were losing a lot of intellectual property that was jeopardizing national security. And one very public example is the fighter jet. One of the fighter jets that the DoD wanted to build, obviously DoD hardly does anything in-house in terms of goods and services. DoD contracts with companies like you and I to provide these goods and services for the DoD. And one of those goods, one of those things the DoD wanted to contract or produce is a fighter jet. And obviously DoD had to subcontract multiple subcontractors to create these fighter jets. One company may be working on the wing, and that company may be working on the engine of this fighter jet, and that company may be working on the tires, etc. Guess what? China got wind of this information that, hey, that the DoD wants to build this very specialized fighter jet. And what did China do? China knew that it was going to be more difficult to hack the DoD directly, but they knew that smaller businesses had little to no cybersecurity defenses in place. So China actually hacked into these multiple smaller companies that had the contract to build this fighter jet. And guess what? They were able to assemble the complete blueprint of this fighter jet, and China actually built this fighter jet before the US was able to do that. So you could imagine the level of intellectual property, the amount of research and development that went into building that fighter jet. China was able to harvest all of that work and intelligence just by hacking smaller companies. So the DoD, this is one reason of many examples why the DoD started taking this very seriously, to say, you know what, we are going to require defense contractors not only to self-attest that they're doing this, but to actually verify by going through an assessment that they're actually protecting the sensitive information the DoD gives to contractors as part of doing contracting with the federal government. And the key types of information are federal contract information and controlled unclassified information. So again, so that's a little overview of what CMMC is and where it's and the reason behind it. So the good thing about this again is that once any company meets this set of 15 requirements, they automatically achieve CMMC level 1 compliance as well. So on the screen, I have the specific list of the 15 requirements that maps to this FAR clause. And again, if you are already doing contracting with any arm of the federal government, you might want to look in your contracts to see if this contract applies to you, if this clause applies to you. Yeah, and feel free to raise your hand, or if you have any questions, or you can enter your question in the chat box as well. But on the screen, thank you, Sarah, for that. On the screen is the specific list of 15 cybersecurity requirements, and this is the basic level that the federal government is requiring of all companies that want to do business with the federal government. As you can see, everything from limiting access to authorized users, processes, or devices, limiting access to the type of actions that authorized users are permitted to execute, all the way to providing protection for malicious code. So without reading this, the content on the slide, you can, and I'm going to make this available. The slides will be available after the call. But you could see there are specific list of things that the DoD and the federal government wants you to do as part of protecting the information that they entrust to you as a federal contractor. Now, next is, as a small business, we all know that small business have constraints in terms of financial constraints. There's a lot to do in 24 hours for a small business. The question is, what is the best way to meet these requirements? One of the ways that we recommend is to use a Microsoft 365 cloud. A lot of small businesses already use a Microsoft 365 cloud. I believe many people, if not everyone on the call today, uses one service or the other of Microsoft 365, either the email in terms of Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Intune. So the question is, instead of reinventing the wheel or having to spend so much money to meet these requirements, you can actually use a Microsoft 365 cloud to help you meet these requirements. And we have an example on the screen. We are a very big believer in using already what you're paying for. A lot of small businesses don't realize that what they're already paying for as part of their Microsoft subscription can actually help them meet these requirements. So for example, on the screen, we have, access control requirements L1 3.1.1, which says to limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users, or devices, including other information systems. Now, the question is, how do you meet these requirements in a cost-effective and sustainable manner over the long term? You can use Microsoft 365 because that's something you most likely use day in, day out in your business already. So, and speaking specifically to this particular cybersecurity requirement from the federal government, you could use Microsoft SharePoint. That's something that many people are familiar with already. You can create a list of users in your company. In addition to, you already have that in your Entra ID or Azure Active Directory. You can create a separate list in your SharePoint. That way, you can have an independent source of truth, right? Instead of you having to go buy an extra governance risk compliance tool or another tool in the marketplace, you can use SharePoint online that you're already paying for, right? And it's easy to maintain. It's something you're already familiar with. Just maintain a list of people that are authorized to access information in your company's 365 environment, on your company's information system. You can use Microsoft Intune, that is also part of Microsoft 365, that you're very likely already paying for, to control who has access, right? Let's say if you bring your own device, if you allow your employees or your contractors to access your company information on their personal mobile phones, how do you protect that? How do you make sure that company information, right, it's kept safe even in BYOD devices, in mobile phones that are owned by your staff, rather than you having to buy a phone for your staff? Microsoft Intune is something that can help you limit that information access, even on BYOD devices that are not owned by the company, that are owned by your staff or your employees. Microsoft Intune is something you can use to do that. Microsoft Entra ID is more like a lot of people don't realize that it's already part of what they're paying for as well, but it allows you a directory to manage your users, create user accounts, change passwords, and things like that. Another example here is as a company using the Microsoft 365 cloud, you can actually inherit some controls from Microsoft. And that's one of the beauties of, instead of having to use your own servers in-house and maintain them and patch them, you can inherit. Microsoft already went through, Microsoft is FedRAMP compliance, and they just went through a CMMC slash NIS 82171 audit as well, and they passed it. So you can actually inherit some of those controls as somebody, as a company using the Microsoft 365 cloud. So again, the point on this is you can use what you're already paying for, leverage your existing Microsoft licenses to meet many of these many of these federal cybersecurity requirements, the 552 clause. Next, before we open it up for Q&A, question and answers, some cybersecurity compliance tips that will help you reduce costs, accelerate your timeline to compliance, and maintain compliance is, first, you need to understand those requirements. Those 15 requirements we showed on the screen earlier. It's important to familiarize yourself, with what those requirements are and how it applies to your business, and how, the most cost-effective way for you to implement it and maintain it over the long haul. Then you also want to know your scope, right? I mentioned earlier on that there are two key types of data or assets that federal contractors would need to protect as part of doing contracting with the federal government. One of those key assets is federal contract information, FCI, right? This is basically any information that is not intended for public release, right? That the government gives you, or you generate on behalf of the government. The other type is controlled unclassified information, is a second key data type that the government wants you to protect. It's called CUI, CUI. Again, this is basically information that the government either gives you or that you generate on behalf of the government as part of doing federal contracting with the government. And typically you store this information, this could be in your own information system, like in your email, in your SharePoint, in your OneDrive, or any other file storage system that you use in the course of doing work. So you want to know what areas of your information system you store this information. You want to understand who has access to it. That way you can protect it and apply those set of 15 requirements to these data types that the government wants you to protect, that the government either gives you or you generate on behalf of the government as part of government contracting. The other piece is that because once you know your scope, once you limit these types of information to specific areas in your organization, then guess what? You only have to apply these 15 requirements to only those areas of your organization rather than your entire information system. So, and what we've seen some contractors do is, once they define their scope, then it actually helps them save money, because now instead of applying these 15 requirements to every aspect of your company, you only have to apply it to the subset of your company or information system where you store, transmit, or process federal contract information, FCI, or controlled unclassified information, CUI. So that helps you reduce your costs, it helps you reduce complexity, and it helps you meet your compliance requirements even faster compared to if you had to do it across your entire organization. Another tip is to begin on time. We are hearing that very soon the DoD that these requirements will cut across the entire federal ecosystem, not just the DoD. So it's important to begin on time because it takes time to understand these requirements and to apply them in your organization. The last piece of advice or tip we have or recommendation is to train your staff. Really, cybersecurity is as strong as your weakest link. It's as strong as someone clicking on a phishing link. So continuous cybersecurity awareness for your staff or your contractors is very important, to make sure that you not only protect this FCI or CUI that the government gives you or that you generate on behalf of the government, but that you also protect your own business interest as well. So again, to summarize before we open it up for Q&A, it's important to understand that we are already in the era of cyber regulations. We are seeing cyber regulations come down for different states, come down for different industry verticals, from the financial to the healthcare to the manufacturing, to retail, and obviously now to federal contracting as well. And it's expanding across industry. So we're already in the era of cyber regulation. It's important to understand what regulations applies to your business, particularly as a federal contractor. We looked at the FAR 52 clause. So we recommend go back to if you're already doing business with any federal agency, go back and check if you have the FAR 52 clause in your contracts, and make sure you're doing those 15 requirements, because if you're not, we've already seen a lot of false claims acts. FCA basically is a situation where an employee or a contractor of an organization actually blows a whistle, reports to the Department of Justice that their company is not keeping to a particular cybersecurity requirement. And the fines have been I've seen from 500,000 all the way to multiple millions, that the Department of Justice fined federal contractors. So again, this is not to promote fear or to know, but it's just to make you aware of what's going on in the ecosystem. So again, it's important to understand, not only are we in the era of cyber regulation, there are cyber regulations already in play for federal contractors. And the most basic one that affects many federal contractors is the FAR 52, which we've listed. There are a basic list of 15 cybersecurity requirements. So please familiarize yourself with those. Check your contracts to see if you have those in your contracts, or if you've not gotten your first government contract yet, just prepare ahead of time to make sure that your system meets these 15 requirements. That way, once you get your first contract, you'll be ready to go. With that, I'm going to open it up for question and answers at this time. And I'm going to start with one. So sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I think I was going to say the same thing that you were going to. We can start with a couple that we received over email prior to this. And then those of you that are on the call, as I said in the chat box, feel free to either raise your hand and we can allow you to talk with John, or feel free to answer to put it in the Q&A box.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. One of the first questions we got pre-submitted was about how do we use AI tools to help with, and at this point, I think I'm actually going to stop the slide share so we can have it more interactive. Stop share. There we go. Awesome. So one of the questions we got earlier before today was, being that entry-level cyber roles are becoming obsolete, what AI tools can we use to gain an advantage for entry-level cyber tasks? So that was the first one. So, and that's a very good question. One of the AI tools businesses can use is something from the Microsoft perspective, is something called the Microsoft Copilot. So there is Copilot right now it's similar to the ChatGPT. So there is Copilot for several use cases. And since we're talking cybersecurity, there's actually a cybersecurity or security Copilot that Microsoft just released. And one of the use cases, how you can take advantage of that to save time and deploy it in entry-level roles, is a lot of times in cybersecurity, companies complain of burnout of their first line of defense, their help desk or their cybersecurity analyst, the first layer, in terms of they have so many alerts, to read through and analyze and understand to see if it's malicious, if it's a false positive and things like that. So instead of having actual human beings sit through all these hundreds and even thousands of alerts from multiple sources, cloud, on-prem, IoT, Internet of Things, etc., and sensors. Now with Security Copilot, you can actually train a Security Copilot on how to identify false positive and how to filter multiple hundreds and thousands of alerts that come through the desk each day, and be able to give you more intelligence, whether this requires further, a human intervention, or if this is something the Security Copilot itself can close. So it's more like your own security chat GPT. So there are a lot of use cases, and actually the ROSA conference is, ongoing in San Francisco this week, right? And a lot of companies are also releasing similar products like the Microsoft Security Copilot. One prime one is the Sky High suite of services. So many companies are releasing, especially in the security space, are releasing ChatGPT type of technologies and tools that companies can leverage to save time and money in terms of cybersecurity. So that's one of the tools. I think it was Ibrahim that asked that question. So Microsoft's Security Copilot, Skykick, Sky High group of tools, and several others out there are an example of how you can leverage AI tools for entry-level tasks. Another question we had here was, what business opportunities exist in the cyberspace in Denver and nationwide? That's a little bit out of our scope, but I'll still answer that in terms of business opportunities. A lot of businesses right now are trying to figure out how to leverage AI in their business. And I can give us an example, since we have, our audience today is our federal contractors. One area where federal contractors can leverage AI tools is in proposal writing, right? It takes a lot of time to write proposals, to respond to RFIs, RFPs, sources sought. But that's one area AI tools can help you save money and maximize time. Right now, there are a lot of, I'm beginning to see a lot of companies create AI solutions where you can actually train an AI model on your past proposals, right? And after you train it, you can actually configure that AI tool to begin to write proposals for you. So instead of you having to respond to proposals 100% from scratch each time, or 80% from scratch each time, the AI tool can actually, you can create AI tools today, either using ChatGPT, Azure OpenAI, and different AI models out there, where they can actually do 80 to 90% of that work for you. So instead of you having to sit down and manually write, or have a human being write your proposals, AI can do 80 to 90% of that job for you. That way you can just proofread it, add maybe 5 to 15% or 20% on top of it, and submit. So you can imagine that can cut your proposal response times anywhere from, it can give you up to 70% savings, right? And if it normally takes you 3 weeks to respond to a proposal, or even a week, if it was 3 weeks, it can get it down for you to a week or less, right? And if it's a week, if a proposal that took you a week, it can get it down for you to 1 day or a matter of hours, right? So the power of this is immense, and a lot of people have attributed, the emergence of AI to the emergence of the internet. So no, we are really seeing drastic use cases where this is saving a lot of time and money for businesses. So in response to the person that asked the question about business opportunities, there is a lot. An example is with proposal writing, particularly for our audience here, is there are a lot of tools out there right now to help you write your proposals and save time and money. But obviously you have to train it using your past proposals. And one big, will I say, criteria to keep in mind when it comes to using AI is data. Data is king, right? You need to have historical data that you can use to train the AI model. That way it can learn what you've done in the past. In this case, the proposals you've written, how you responded, what are the different roles you have in a company, some overview of your company. That way you just feed it some of this basic information. And after you do it, you just sit back and it will do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. You just have to come in, proofread it, and add any other final touches, to it before you release it. So literally, like, this is something a lot of federal contractors, are already using today as we speak. So that's one use case, where AI tools can help in terms of business opportunities in Denver and nationwide.
Thanks,
Sarah,
John.
sure.
Yeah, yep. One of our attendees is wondering how or if she can use her Microsoft license when her contractors have their own personal devices that they're using.
Okay. So how they can use their Microsoft licenses for compliance when their contractors are using their personal devices?
Correct. That's what I'm understanding. Yes.
Awesome. That's that's a very good question, and that's a very popular use case that we see. And the answer is yes. Microsoft gives you, so it depending on what Microsoft license you have, for the person that asked that question, if your Microsoft license, you want to make sure you want to check that that license includes Microsoft Intune, right? So long as the license you have includes Microsoft Intune, then you're already paying for that. All you have to do is to configure there's something called application protection policies. Once you log into your Microsoft portal, if you have the Intune license, it will unlock for you the application protection policies. And in there, you can go in and configure the security settings you want, or the behavior or the end user experience you want once your contractors or employees are using their personal devices to access your company information. Let's say SharePoint, email, Teams, OneDrive, whatever the case may be. So, and some of the security settings you can configure are things like you can restrict copy and paste, right? That once your contractors or employees are accessing your company information using their personal devices, they cannot copy your company information from email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams to their personal devices, let's say to their personal email. You can even lock it down such that they cannot save company information anywhere else except company OneDrive and SharePoint. And the beautiful thing about the solution as well is that with Intune, you can configure it in such a way that, let's say, if that contractor or staff leaves your company, you can remotely wipe your company information, basically remove your company information off of that personal device without having to physically touch that device, right? It's basically some clicks of the button on your 365 admin portal, and your company email, your company, all your company information will be wiped off that contractors or staff employees device without destroying their personal information. And that's the beautiful thing about this. It's intelligent enough to understand what is company data and what is personal data. And let's say if somebody, let's say, is an independent contractor on 1099 that has completed a project work for you, and while they were working for you, you give them access without even touching their device, you can remove your company information and remove their access using Intune. So that's one way you can use your Microsoft license to control your data on contractor or personally owned devices without touching it. So again, the key is you want to make sure that your Microsoft license includes that Intune license. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
I believe so. Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, while we wait for some other questions to come in here. John, obviously you're, an expert on 365. If you were forced to use a different system, if you had to provide another recommendation, what would that be?
I mean, another recommendation other than 365?
Right, yes.
So it's going to depend on the specific use case or the specific requirements that the company needs. So obviously, a major competitor is the Google Google Cloud or Google Workspace for Business. So they recently got FedRAMP compliant as well, and that's what some businesses are using. So that would be another alternative to the Microsoft 365 Cloud. And one more other than Google is also Amazon Web Services, AWS Cloud, as well. They also have some offerings for small business solutions as well.
Thanks, John. Looks like we have a question from one of our attendees. Helen, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk to John here.
Okay. Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. It's fantastic. I do have one more question. Any information around cybersecurity insurance?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question and a huge area of interest and questions that we've received. So, but before I speak on that, is there any particular area of you want me to focus on with respect to cybersecurity insurance?
No, just in general, what are the things that, because and I was the one that asked about how to secure, folks that bring their own devices, because my business model is I subcontract projects. So so all my everything I do is subcontracted. So that was my first question. But also the nature of projects. We work across different industries, so not just federal government, but healthcare, banking, private companies. And I'm just curious, what kind of insurance one should have at minimum when having these types of businesses.
Okay, thanks for that clarity. So first, I will start answering by letting you know some of the requirements I've seen actually out there in the industry, and then make a recommendation based on your specific use case. For example, a our company was accepted into a program, and that program specifically required us to have about $4 million in aggregate of cybersecurity insurance. So what you might see, depending on the projects you work on and the vendors or companies you work with, you want to read your contract clauses. Sometimes they don't tell you upfront, they just bury it in the clauses. And that's why it's important to go through these clauses. So sometimes they will actually tell you in the contract terms and clauses that, hey, you need to have X amount of cybersecurity insurance. So that's one place to start. But in use cases where that is not spelled out or specified, we recommend nothing less than $1 million in cyber insurance, right? Because with the rate of cyber incidents that are happening these days, even affecting small businesses, I mean, it easily gets up to $1 million, right? From the people you have to notify to getting your business back up and running to so there are multiple things, right? Depending on and you say you work in several industries. So and I don't know if you were in the beginning, but I showed that across healthcare, even federal, financial, there are multiple cyber regulations. Like even car dealers or auto dealers, right, are also getting a cyber regulation for their industry. So you may have multiple, and one of the challenges in the industry right now is that there is no, will I say, umbrella cyber regulation for every industry to adhere to. Right now, what we are seeing is each industry is coming up with their own unique cyber regulation. And that places an additional burden on a company like you that serves multiple industry verticals, because now you will most likely have to understand those requirements so you can abide by them and be compliant. So my recommendation would be, number one, look into your contracts and see for each of these projects you do across the different verticals, are there specific cyber security insurance requirements? Then you have to do those. But in the absence of those, I would recommend nothing less than $1 million in coverage. Hopefully that helps, Helen.
It does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to see if Melissa, I think we have Melissa. Melissa, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, I did. I had a question regarding Google Workspace. I switched last year from Microsoft 365 to Google Workspace. I like the platform better. Does it have the same compliance as Microsoft 365?
Yeah, Google, they have also some good compliance capabilities as well. So yeah, the short answer to your question is yes. Google Workspace does have some of those capabilities, for example, to control mobile device management and things like that. So yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from our participants? And maybe while they're doing that, John, do you have any kind of last thoughts you'd like to share with us before we bring Marie and B-side up?
So in terms of last thoughts, so first again, I want to thank Andre and Carlene, Sarah, and the Denver MBDA team for the opportunity to share and go learn with everyone on the call. So in terms of our last thoughts, I will highly encourage businesses, especially, there is this, will I say, notion or idea that cybersecurity does not affect small businesses, but it does, right? Everything from phishing to tech support scams to business email compromise. I was reading the FBI internet crime report for 2023, and the top 3 areas, for internet crime were investment scams, situations where I read a report earlier this year where a construction company wired about $300,000, right, to a malicious actor by through reverse engineering the communication between the construction company, the clients, and this hacker. So the second one was business email compromise. Email is a major tool of communication for a lot of businesses, including small businesses. So the point here is that cybersecurity does affect every business, even individuals. One of the highest targeted people, especially in Colorado, And one beautiful thing about our report, and I highly encourage everyone to check it out, it actually breaks it down to age groups. The elderly, the elderly people in Colorado were one of the highest targeted demographics for cyber crimes. So it affects both businesses and even individuals. So just want to encourage everyone to take cybersecurity seriously, invest in cybersecurity in your business, right? There are several frameworks out there, and especially for federal contractors, this list of 15 requirements as a federal contractor, they're not difficult. They will, beyond helping you be compliant, they actually help you protect your business, as a small business. And like I said, there are only 15 requirements, right? So I want to encourage everyone to take advantage of that, not only for compliance purposes, but also to safeguard their own business interests. With that, I want to say again, thank you everyone for taking the time to join. Hopefully this was you found some value with this, and thank you again to the MPDA team for this platform. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce Marie Peters with B-Side Fund. She is going to give us an overview of how their programs can help small businesses obtain funding.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everybody. My name is Marie Peters with B-Side Capital and B-Side Fund. We're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to foster the economic growth of diverse small businesses. And we do that through small business lending programs. We've been around since 1990 and primarily work with the small business administration loan programs. And I'll speak a little bit more about that right now. We can provide direct lending to small business owners who are unable to get bank financing for whatever reason. Maybe you have a lower credit score, maybe you don't have collateral to pledge, or a very common reason might be maybe you don't have enough years in business where a bank can take a look at that. And so we offer a variety of different loan programs and can provide financing anywhere between $20,000 and $350,000 with a repayment period anywhere between 3 years all the way up to 10 years. We do have programs that are anywhere between a 6% fixed interest rate all the way up through prime plus 4.5 for some variable rate SBA loans. Something I like to point out, though, is because we try to work with businesses who are unable to obtain bank financing, we don't have any prepayment penalties. We're designed to be able to help businesses in the beginning, maybe 2-3 years. And if you have a longer term loan with us, and at that point you're able to refinance with a bank, we certainly want you to do that. That's what our programs are really designed for. You can use our loans for a variety of purposes, including working capital, which is really any business expense, purchase of equipment, inventory. If you're looking to acquire a business, for example, whether you're expanding your current business by purchasing another one, or maybe you're just entering small business ownership by purchasing an existing business. And we also have some debt refinance options where maybe you started your business with a business credit card, or you had to take on some high interest rate debt to make payroll last month. We're able to help try to refinance those so that you can get a better interest rate and pay that over time. We do have certain requirements where we want to have a personal guarantee for any owners that own 20% or more. We're usually going to take a lien on business assets, which is typical of the industry. We do have some smaller loan programs for rural-based businesses where we can go unsecured. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out. And the same goes with equity contribution. A lot of times lenders want you to be able to put in a little bit of cash into the project as well. We'll take a look at that. But again, depending on where you're located, how much you're looking to borrow, and if you are considered a low income business, we can make some exceptions to those rules. To get started, you could check out our website at bsidefund.org. We have a quick eligibility check, which will kind of point you in the right direction, whether you need a small loan or all the way up if you are seeking to purchase commercial real estate. Our organization can help with that as well. We then ask you to fill out an application, and we collect all the documentation that we would need to get approval through our loan review committee, and if it's applicable, SBA's approval as well. And then we are able to close and fund that loan. We also realize, applicants may not have all the documentation that they need for a loan. And so again, we work with so many different resource partners. Minority Business Development Agency is one of them that can help you and provide that guidance on the items that you need to put together for that loan package. We also have other, programs and articles on our website to, again, point you to the right resources. Again, if we're unable to help for whatever reason, but we're happy to speak with any business to, again, point you in the right direction. So those are my comments. Just want to thank MBDA for including me. And again, I know borrowing money sometimes can be intimidating. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me or anybody on our team, and we're happy to answer whatever specific questions that you may have about the process. And like I said, point you in the right direction.
Thank you, Marie. Everyone that's still on the call, you do have the ability to unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like to, if you have something on your mind for Marie. Otherwise, I will be sending out a recording of this webinar. Again, it will include John's slides, the resource that he mentioned. It will include Marie's slides and their contact information, so you can feel free to reach out to them directly with any questions. And with that, I think we will end the webinar and give everyone back a few minutes in their day. Thank you so much for attending, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah.